I lived through a chapter of my life I never imagined would be written one, where my own son betrayed me, pushed me into the shadows of a home I had built with love. But in uncovering the hidden truth of my family, I found a strength I didn't know I still had. This is one of those family stories that hurts and heals all at once, where motherhood is tested and truth burns away every illusion. And like many family stories, it taught me that real freedom sometimes begins only when you finally choose to let go. Before we go any further, may God bless you and keep you. May you never lack health, love, or hope on your journey. And right now, let us know where you're watching from. I am Marlene Carter, a 73-year-old black woman with silver curls, soft as fall clouds, and hands that done spent years stirring pots, planting greens, mending clothes, and touching the faces of the people I love. Folks like to say the older you get, the less you cling to material things. But maybe I'm one of the few left. The kind of person for whom every room, every wooden step, every patch of sunlight on the floor is a whole living chapter of memory. This house, this red brick house, at the end of Cedar Fall Street, where the wind off the lake carries that faint smell of moss, been my whole world for near 4 decades. It ain't just where I live, it's where I loved, where I endured, where I grew, where I raised my child, buried my people, and held on to what I call the inheritance of flesh and blood. This house used to belong to my mother-in-law, Miss Lucinda Carter, a strong, dark-skinned woman with that old-school beauty, posture straight like the wooden beams they used in them southern homes back in the day. She and her husband, Earl, built this place in the late 1960s, when black folks in Michigan were still running into wall after wall. They picked every board, every brick themselves, always saying, a house ought to be the place that makes you stand tall, even when the world outside tries to bend you low. When I married Samuel Carter, Miss Lucinda's son, this house became my home. I done lived here pretty much my whole grown life. I know every creak in the stairs, every spot on the kitchen floor that runs hotter 'cause the pipes sit close, every tiny crack in the wall from them long, bitter winters. I know how the wind whistles through the north side window like somebody sighing, and how the summer morning sun makes that gold streak on the wooden shelf. The very spot Miss Lucinda used to line with her jars of dried spices. This house done witnessed everything. Dinners loud with laughter, the day I gave birth to my first child, in that bone-deep cold of February. The day Samuel collapsed in the backyard from his heart acting up, and I had to hold him up on the wet grass. The day I brought my first granddaughter home from the hospital, laying her in the old wooden cradle, the one Samuel built himself back in the day. Every step, every corner carries something sacred. I can still hear Miss Lucinda's spoon hitting that cast iron skillet, still feel Samuel's warm hand guiding me through them long winters. This house breathes, in the truest sense. Breeze through the wind rushing past the apple tree out back, through the smell of old wood mixed with morning coffee, through that soft groan the floorboards make every time I walk from the kitchen to the living room. But what folks don't tell you is this. Sometimes the thing you love the most is the thing that leaves you the most exposed. I started to learn that when Terrence, my only child, moved back in for a while after his job shifted. I ain't complain. Truth be told, I was happy the house had young footsteps again. Happy I could spend time with my daughter-in-law and my grandbaby. But soon enough, that happiness turned into this quiet, shapeless ache. It started small, real small. But old folks like me, we feel every change a house goes through. One morning, I woke up and saw that the old wall clock, the one me and Samuel bought after our honeymoon, was gone from its spot. In its place was some slick, plain-faced clock with no numbers, all cold and white. Terrence said, all casual, "Ma, that old clock, look, dated." This one more modern, I smiled. But inside, my smile didn't move. And then little by little, more adjustments showed up. The old knife set Miss Lucinda left me disappeared, replaced with some shiny steel set. My hand-woven wool rug got rolled up and shoved in a storage corner 'cause the color too dark. The 3 jars of spices I dried myself got pushed to the back of the cabinet, making room for store-bought sauces. Nobody argued. But every little thing felt like invisible scissors cutting through my memories. I kept trying to think positive. Told myself, young folks like change. You just old and slow to keep up. But some nights, when the house got quiet, I'd stand in the living room looking at all the new things, all that white, crisp, modern furniture, and feel like I was standing in some staged model home, not the place I'd poured my whole life into. Then came the day I overheard Terrence talking on the phone, voice low but clear as day. If we remodel everything, this house gonna go up in value a lot. Mom gonna have to move into assisted living eventually. It's just a matter of time. My heart dropped straight to the floor. Maybe he thought I couldn't hear. Maybe he thought I was in the basement or watching TV, but I was standing right behind the door, hearing every word. My hand touched the wooden frame, the same piece of wood Samuel replaced after the storm back in 1987. And for the first time, I felt separated from the son I raised with my own 2 hands. After that moment, this house stopped being just a place full of sweet memories. It became a place being invaded, reshaped without my permission. Like Terrence saw me as a temporary caretaker, not the woman who lived here before he even knew his ABCs. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. Black women like me been trained our whole lives to stay quiet and stay strong. But quiet don't mean blind. Quiet don't mean painless. And deep inside me, beneath all them warm memories, a thin crack started to form. A crack I knew only needed one more hit to split wide open, big enough to swallow everything I ever thought I could trust. I didn't know back then that this crack was going to lead me straight to a truth buried for more than 40 years. A truth that might save me or tear this whole family apart. Some days I wake up and it feels like the whole house done changed its breathing. Not 'cause of the weather, not 'cause I'm getting older and more sensitive, but because every morning when I walk down them stairs, I see something else that ain't where it used to be. Like somebody been moving my memories around while I'm sleeping, replacing them with shiny, unfamiliar things that ain't got no soul. Terrence calls them changes, improvements. To me, they feel like invisible scratches, small at first, but sharp enough to sting every time you touch 'em. I remember one day I was standing at the sink when I heard my daughter-in-law, Keisha, call out from the living room, her voice light as if she was commenting on some bargain bin item in a store. Oh my God, these glasses are so old, kind of sad looking. I'm sure Mom Marlene just keeps them out of habit. Nobody uses stuff like this anymore. I froze where I stood. Those glasses were a wedding gift from my mama. She worked extra night shifts at the sewing factory to buy 'em for us. Something small, but it was my last string tied to her. And now they were old, sad, like they ain't worth nothing beyond how they look. I stepped out toward the living room, ready to say something, but my voice died when I saw Keisha casually rolling up my embroidered linen into a trash bag. She told Terrence, "Any ugly pieces, we toss 'em out, little by little. Mom won't notice." Terrence didn't protest, just mumbled, eyes glued to his phone. I stood there, feeling like I'd turned invisible in my own damn house. And that feeling, it hurt so bad it stole a breath from me. But those were just the surface things. What truly clenched my heart was the shift in Terrence himself. My son, the boy I held through fevers, the boy I taught to tie his shoes, the boy I waited hours for outside school when kids teased him about his skin. That day, I was picking greens in the kitchen when I heard Terrence speak to Keisha. Low voice, sharp enough to slice the air. "I've been saying, we gotta renovate this place. If we leave it the way it is, it won't sell for much later." "Can't live alone forever?" "Exactly," Keisha said. "A good nursing home will take care of her proper. And we can open up the living room, redo the kitchen." Not because of the renovations, but because of their tone. The way they talked about putting me in a nursing home like they were discussing moving a potted plant out to the porch. No pause. No, what do you think? Mom, no moment to consider I still got a human heart inside this body. I ain't someone who cries easy. Not after all these years being strong for my race, my circumstances, and all the losses that life serves up. But in that moment, I looked at my hands, the same hands that held Terrence through every stage of his growing up, and I wondered, so just 'cause I'm getting old, do I turn into a burden overnight? A problem they need to reorganize? That evening, I made chicken stew, Terrence's favorite when he was little. I hoped one taste might bring something back to him. But when I set the pot on the table, Keisha laughed under her breath. Oh, this again, Mom? It's so thick. Who eats this? People healthy now 'cause they eat clean, not old school food like this. He just glanced at his bowl and said, Mom, her people are having a small gathering. Next week, maybe let's switch it up a bit. If the neighbors come by and see we still cooking like this. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I heard the whole unspoken sentence. My food, the food I used to raise him, was now not classy enough. That night, alone in the kitchen, I laid my hand on that warm pot of chicken stew. And it felt like touching my own heart, left behind, cooling down, even though it still had heat inside. But the thing I remember most happened not too long ago. One gray afternoon, I was watering the plants when I heard Terrence talking to one of his friends. Yeah, we plan to redo the whole living room. Mom, we'll take care of her. She's old now. A nursing home's fine. And we need our own space. Our own space. And re-space is not commons and right. Those three words slammed into me like a metal door closing. Whose space? This was my house, the one I saved for, dollar by dollar, through some of the hardest years of my life with Samuel. And now I was treated like someone taking up space in my own home. I stumbled back, my hands shaken so bad I dropped the watering can. The splash on the tiles sounded like something breaking inside me. Right then, I knew a distance had formed between me and Terrence. A gap too wide to patch up. Not the kind made by generations or lifestyle, but the kind made by indifference. And indifference, that's the coldest gap of all. What cut the deepest, though, was the way they looked at me. Not with the affection of a child looking at his mama, but with the eyes of folks appraising property. How long will it last? How easy is it to transfer? How much of a headache will it be to handle? Every time Keisha said, "This house got so much potential," I felt a chill run down my spine. Every time Terrence said, "Mom should rest in a center," I heard, "Mom don't belong here anymore." I stayed quiet, but I wasn't blind. The truth was plain. They don't see this house as a home anymore, just an asset. And me, the keeper of its memories, just an obstacle. Some nights I sit in the living room, the old yellow lamp spilling its soft light across the floor, and I listen to the wind blow in from Lake Allen. I close my eyes, hoping that when I open them, everything will be back like it used to be. Samuel here beside me. Terrence still the little boy running to hug my leg for a story. Me still the one who belonged in this small world. But that night, in the hush of it all, I understood. The storm ain't here yet, but the clouds been gathering, layer after layer, covering up the horizon. Something is coming, and I can feel it deep in my bones. A breaking, a shattering, coming closer, every single second. I don't know if there's a moment in a mother's life more cruel than the moment she realizes her own child sees her as a burden, something heavy, something that got to be removed from the house so their new life can run smooth. But what happened to me that day went far beyond cruel. It was a Friday afternoon, sky all gray, fog from Lake Allen spread over Cedar Fall like a thin gray blanket. "Ma, we want to talk to you for a minute." I wiped my hands on my worn apron, stood still, looking at the two of them. Keisha was sitting cross-legged on the chair, hands clasped, eyes carrying not even the bare minimum of respect for the owner of the house. Terrence stood beside her, hands in his pockets, his face caught somewhere between nerves and determination. "Ma, it's hard for you living here alone," Terrence started. We found a really good place, a nursing home out in the suburbs, clean, safe, doctors on site. You stay in there would make us feel better. Keisha nodded, chimed in, and the house is kinda old. I was thinking of renovating it. When you feelin' better, you can come visit. I heard their voices, but it felt like their words were drifting through thick air and breaking apart before they reached me. So what y'all mean? I said slowly, a son avoiding his mother's eyes. Not out of shame, but 'cause he's scared to face the truth of what he know he's doing. I understood. I had understood for a long time. They were just saying out loud what they had already decided in silence. I turned to walk away, but Terrence grabbed my hand, soft, but firm enough to let me know he meant what he was saying. I just want the best for you. I looked at his hand, the same hand I held when he learned to walk, and my heart dipped low, low, low. The best for me, I whispered, or the easiest for y'all. The air thickened. Keisha cut her eyes at Terrence, telling him to continue. Terrence sighed and then said, voice hardening, you don't get it, Ma. We need a future. This house, it's gonna be ours later anyway. I didn't even have time to respond before the doorbell rang. Keisha got up to answer it. Two men in moving company uniforms stepped inside, clipboards in hand. We're here to pick up the items from the storage room and laundry room, per the arrangement this morning. I turned to Terrence. He lowered his head. In that single moment, I couldn't hear rain, wind, not even my own heartbeat. Just a heavy silence crashing down. Terrence had called people to start clearing the house, before even speaking to me. My face burned hot, but my hands went ice cold. I walked toward the door to the basement, where I kept Samuel's things, Miss Lucinda's blankets, whole winters and memories packed into old boxes. I'll go down there, Terrence said, unsure but trying to sound firm. You don't need to go. I turned and looked at him. I'm strong enough. It's my things. I'll handle it. I stepped down each stair. The overhead bulb was dimmer than usual, flickering like it was tired. The concrete floor felt colder, the smell of old wood and cement heavier than ever. I came down here every month to clean, but today, the place felt foreign enough to break my heart. I searched for the wooden box that held Samuel's old letters when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned enough to see Terrence's shadow stretch across the wall. Ma, just rest, he said, voice shaky but sharp. I'll finish down here. Before I could answer, the basement door slammed shut, hard, fast, bang. The metal latch slid across with a cold, slicing sound. Terrence, what are you doing? I shouted. It's just for a moment, Ma. His voice echoed down, trembling like wind scraping tin. Just for a moment. Just stay there for a bit. I grabbed the doorknob and twisted. It didn't move. I pounded on the door, my fists echoing off the bare walls like I was banging on my own fear. Terrence! Open this door! Have you lost your damn mind? No answer. Just his footsteps, moving away, fading, disappearing. Not the footsteps of someone rushing to fix a mistake, but the footsteps of someone avoiding the truth. Darkness folded around me. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from facing a truth deeper than humiliation. That the person you love the most can push you into the deepest pit. I braced my hands on my knees so I wouldn't fall, my palms meeting the freezing floor. In the damp smell of old brick and the chill rising off the walls. Uneven. The breathing of someone wondering if they still belong anywhere in the home they built their whole life around. I stood, shaky, running my hand along the wall to find the light switch. The basement felt darker than usual, like it knew something in my life had just flipped upside down. Then my eyes caught something, a slight indentation in the wall, a thin crack running across it. Something I had never noticed before, even after decades of coming down here. Why? Why today? I touched it. The brick was ice cold, but one brick sat just the slightest bit off center, invisible unless you stood right where the dim light hit it. I pressed my fingertip against it. Click. A small sound. But in that stillness, it struck like thunder. The wall shifted, slow but sure, opening a slit of light thin as a thread. I froze, my heart thumped, not from fear, but from a strange, deep knowing that I was about to touch something buried for decades. Something important enough that someone in this family once hid it behind a wall. I placed my whole hand on the loose brick and pushed again. The wall opened wider, just enough for me to squeeze through. Inside was a tiny space, barely big enough to hold a few things. The basement bulb cast its weak light in, revealing an old wooden box covered in dust and a leather-bound book beside it. I knelt, my hand trembling as I touched the box. It was heavy, heavy in a way that felt unnatural. Like whatever was inside wasn't just objects, it was years of our family's past no one had ever spoken of. And in that moment, with the locked basement door above me still feeling like a blade pressed against my trust, I understood, yes, I was trapped. But maybe this door was the one that would decide the rest of my life. I put my hand on the lid, and I opened it. Thank y'all for sticking with us all the way to this point. If you busy or gotta go right now, hit that like button so you can find this video easy later. All right now, let's get back to the story. My hands were still shaking when I opened the wooden box. It was so old, the varnish was almost gone. The corners worn smooth like they'd been held by someone over and over, then forced to sit in darkness for decades. The lid lifted easier than I expected, almost like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Inside, under a layer of yellowed parchment, were three things: a thin stack of papers tied with a small rope, a folded letter, and a photograph of a young man I had never seen before. I picked up the photo first. The dim basement light hit his face just right. Sharp eyes, but gentle, warm brown skin. The kind of half smile you see on people smart enough to understand how hard life can be, yet still stubborn enough to hold on to a little hope. In the corner of the photo, written in ink, for LC. Keep him safe, L.C. Lucinda Carter? Folks used to call her that. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I set the photo aside and carefully untied the rope around the papers. The sound of it scraping across the dry pages felt brittle, like metal wheels grinding over old dirt roads. Inside was a birth certificate, but the name on it wasn't Samuel Carter, my husband's name. It read, Samuel Elias Montgomery. My heart clenched tight. Montgomery, a name I had never heard in my life. I blinked once, twice, a third time, reading it over and over like maybe my eyes were lying. Trick in my mind. In my head flashed scattered memories: Samuel laughing, Samuel holding our child, Samuel whispering love into my ear soft as summer wind. I never knew, never even imagined, that Carter wasn't his real name. Beneath the birth certificate was an adoption paper, signed by both Lucinda and Earl Carter. In the section for reason for adoption, it said simply, birth parents missing after political conflict. Child has no safe guardian. Political conflict? What conflict? Whose? I turned to the folded letter. It sat there like some sleeping creature. And when I opened it, the words shot across the page like lightning tearing the sky apart. Lucinda, if you're reading this, it means things are out of my hands. I don't know if I'm alive or have already been taken, but I know one thing for certain. The boy cannot fall into their hands. They think I betrayed them. But you know, the truth ain't that. I just refuse to do something that would destroy our whole community. Take care of him. Don't ever tell him who his father is. E.M. Montgomery, Samuel's real father. I felt my whole body go weak, not from fear, but from a deep bone-cutting pain. The man I loved for more than half my life had lived his whole life under a name that wasn't his. And I, his wife, had lived beside that truth without ever knowing. I gripped the edge of the box to steady myself. My heartbeat skittered off rhythm, wild and uneven, like storm rain slamming against a window. But I didn't collapse, because right then a single thought sliced through the chaos, sharp, cold, clear as metal striking stone. What if Terrence knew? What if his precious identity, grandson of the esteemed Carter family, the thing he bragged about everywhere, wasn't true at all. I was never a woman who cared about power. But even through the hurt cutting me open, one truth stood bright. These papers could change everything, not the past, but the future and the balance of power between me, the mother he tried to cast aside, and Terrence, the son who saw me as a burden to remove. I placed all the papers back in the box, then held it to my chest. The hard wood pressing into my skin didn't hurt. It steadied me, cleared my mind, made me stronger than I had felt in years. I stood and tried the basement door again, still locked. But instead of pounding or screaming like before, I stepped back to the wooden stair and sat down, taking a long breath. The panic faded, replaced by a strange, settled quiet. Not the quiet of someone defeated, but the quiet of someone seeing their whole life with new eyes. The eyes of a woman who had just found a truth big enough to flip an entire war she never asked to fight. I gently brushed my fingers over the box. Samuel, I whispered, you hid this to protect your family. I understand. And now, I'm going to use it to protect mine, my own life. Footsteps echoed above me, distant, fading, then gone completely. They left me. They really thought I was helpless, but they didn't know. I had just found the root of everything. And when a mother, especially a black mother who spent her whole life being underestimated, learns a truth like that, there ain't nothing in this world that can break her again. I looked at the thin strip of light slipping under the basement door. Just a sliver, but enough. And I knew from that moment on, I was no longer the one trapped. I was the one preparing to step out, holding a truth powerful enough to drown every plan Terrence was making. I closed my eyes, pulled the wooden box tight against my chest. But you didn't know. Your mama just found the one thing you never could have seen coming. But in that silence, a vow lit up inside me. I would walk out of here. Not as the woman my son locked away, but as the keeper of the heaviest secret in the Carter family's history. And this was only the beginning. When that basement door finally opened, the light poured down like cold water. Maybe he thought if he acted calm enough, the whole thing wouldn't spin out of control. Ma, come on up. I'm sorry. Earlier I just got heated. He locked me in a basement and called it getting heated. I looked him dead in the eyes. Not to see if he felt guilty. I already knew that answer. I looked because I needed to remember this moment. The exact moment a mother realizes the child she carried like something fragile no longer sees her as human. But I didn't yell, didn't curse. I walked up them stairs like some obedient ghost. What Terrence didn't know was this. When I came up those steps, I wasn't the same woman he shoved into the shadows. I rose with a box of truth beating soft but steady against my chest. I needed time. I needed to watch. And more than anything, I needed an ally. The next day, when Terrence and Keisha were out, I took my phone. That old phone they always mocked for being slow as a turtle, and dialed the number of attorney Renee Howell. I remembered her from an article years back. She helped an elderly woman win back her house after her own daughter tricked her into signing it away. One of the few black lawyers who always stood with the folks being stepped on by their own families. The phone rang twice. Then someone picked up. Howell Law Office. This is Renee's sharp voice. Clear. Strong. A voice used to standing in storms. Miss Renee, I said. My voice so hoarse I barely recognized it. I need help. I told her everything. How Terrence wanted to put me in a nursing home. How I'd been locked in the basement. How they'd already contacted contractors without my consent. And finally, about the box. I heard her chair scrape lightly on the other end. You said you found your husband's adoption papers. Yes, and no one else in the household knows. Not yet. They will, if I want them to. There was a short silence, not confusion, but understanding. The kind of silence someone gives when they realize they're hearing something that can flip an entire battlefield. Miss Marlene Renee said, I want you to come see me this afternoon. Not at your home. Come to my office, I nodded. Even though she couldn't see it, I knew then I had found the right woman. Renee's office sat in an old building near downtown. When I walked inside, the smell of paper and hot coffee hit me, a smell that made me feel nervous and protected at the same time. Renee was in her 40s, tall, with curly hair pulled back. Her eyes were sharp as a blade, but warm too, the kind of warmth that comes from someone who's seen too much injustice and decided she'll stand with the wounded every time. "You brought the documents?" she asked gently. I set the wooden box on her desk. Renee opened the papers one by one, reading every single line. She didn't ask useless questions, didn't say poor you, didn't gasp or get dramatic. She just read, focused, exact, steady, like someone defusing a bomb and can't let her fingers tremble. At last, she looked up. "Do you understand what you're holding, Miss Marlene?" "I do. They're the truth. And that truth can—" I paused. "Shake everything apart." Renee nodded. Her eyes lit with something I'd only seen in people who know the tide just turned. "Not just shake things," she said, "but redefine ownership of that home. If your in-laws adopted your husband, then the estate passed legally only to the spouse and any biological children. That means this property belongs to you, solely. Terrence has no legal claim unless you give him one." My fingers curled tight. "But if he reacts, if he does something reckless—" Renee held my gaze, didn't blink, didn't flinch. "You need to understand this, Miss Marlene. Power belongs to the one who holds the truth. And right now, that person is you." When she said that, a cold line ran down my spine. Not fear, clarity. For the first time in weeks, I felt air in my lungs again. That evening, I went home. Terrence and Keisha were in the living room talking. I walked in easy, slow, like nothing had changed, though everything had. "Ma, why were you out all day without saying?" Terrence asked. Annoyed, "I went for a walk," I replied. Keisha raised her eyebrows. "You should have told us." I looked straight at both of them. Just one look, short, but sharp enough to cut the room in half. Keisha sat up straighter, hands tightened on her knees. Maybe she didn't know why, but she felt it. My voice wasn't the same voice she thought she could talk over. Terrence stepped closer. "Ma, is something wrong?" I smiled. Not soft, not kind, but the smile of someone who's seen what others don't know exists. "Nothing's wrong. Everything gonna make sense soon. Don't you worry." I said it like a prophecy, and I watched a flicker, small but real, pass through Terrence's eyes. Unease. I realized then, sometimes the silence of a mother is scarier than any yellin' she could ever do. In the days that followed, I watched everything. Every word Keisha whispered into her phone. Every call Terrence made to the bank about renovation loans. Every item quietly moved out of place. I didn't speak, didn't fight, didn't confront. I went invisible, the way they wanted me to be. But this time, that invisibility helped me see everything clearer. Keisha talking about making the living room classy, Terrence asking about renovation costs, them whispering that if I didn't cooperate, they'd force the situation. I heard it all. I stored it, every syllable. And instead of pain, I felt a strange calm. Maybe because I knew what they didn't. They were dancing on a broken bridge, and I was the only one who knew where the cracks were. I sat in the kitchen, my hand resting on the wooden box, and whispered inside my own mind, "Your time is up, Terrence. Now, it's your mama's turn." I don't remember exactly how long I slept the night before Renee came. Maybe an hour, maybe not a single minute. But I still sat up at dawn, opened the window, and let the cold wind from Lake Allen rush in. It carried that metallic smell, that wet mist, that scent of a day where something was bound to happen. I wasn't scared. The strangest part was, I truly wasn't scared anymore. Maybe when a woman has been locked in a basement by her own son and rises back up with a box that can turn her family's fate upside down. The only thing left inside her is a cold clarity that nothing can shake. Renee said she'd come by mid-morning, so I waited. Terrence and Keisha were still asleep upstairs, probably from staying up late talking about home renovations like they did every night. While I was making coffee, I heard a car stop out front. I looked at the clock. 9:15. Renee was always on time. People like that? Rare. I opened the front door. Renee walked in with her quick, clean stride, followed by a legal courier, a tall, brown-skinned man with a face that didn't show a single thought. "You sure you want to do this?" Renee asked softly. I nodded. No hesitation. Then let's let them receive the first item. We were standing in the living room when Terrence came down the stairs, rubbing his eyes, about to say his usual line. "Ma, you up early today." But the moment he saw the man standing next to Renee, holding that pale yellow envelope with the sealed stamp, Terrence froze. Keisha came down slower, still half asleep, until she saw the envelope. Her eyes flew wide, then she shot Terrence a quick look, like she needed instructions. "Are you Terrence Carter?" the courier asked, voice flat as a judge reading a verdict. Terrence swallowed. "Yeah. I'm here to deliver an official notice regarding property dispute and civil misconduct." I watched Terrence's eyes go wide. Keisha stepped back, hand gripping the railing. Renee stood beside me, silent. The kind of silence that weighs more than any threat. "What's this about?" Terrence's voice cracked when he turned to me. "Just open it," I said, calm in a way that surprised even me. "In this house, you ain't the only one who knows how to prepare." Terrence tore the envelope, but his hands were shaking so hard the papers slipped to the floor. Keisha bent down to help, but the moment her eyes skimmed the first lines, she gasped. "Terrence, they're saying the papers you filed got signs of forged signatures." Renee stepped forward, her voice sharp as a fresh-cut blade. "Not just forged signatures. The notary stamp you used belonged to someone who died 3 years ago. The death certificate is on file. That means you knowingly used invalid documents." I didn't need to look to know Terrence was trembling. I could hear him sucking in a breath, short, panicked, like a man going underwater. "No, no, that's not. I didn't," Terrence stammered. "You didn't." Renee's chuckle was ice cold. "I have the handwriting analysis right here. The signature reading Marlene Carter on that transfer form does not match her authentic signature. It'll take a judge less than 2 minutes to see that." Keisha clutched Terrence's arm. "You told me you only downloaded a template and edited it?" I thought. "Shut up," Terrence snapped. But even the snap sounded weak, like the last swing of someone already losing the fight. Renee looked at me, her tone casual, like she was asking about groceries. "Miss Marlene, would you like me to proceed to part 2? I nodded. Terrence stepped back. Part 2? What else is there?" he asked, voice almost pleading. Renee opened her folder, pulled out the copies of the adoption papers and the birth certificate with the name Samuel Elias Montgomery. She laid them on the table, gently turning them so Terrence could read every word. "This is the authentic lineage record of the Carter family. Your father, Miss Marlene's husband, was not the biological child of your grandparents." Terrence went stone still. Keisha covered her mouth with both hands, letting out a breath, like someone had just punched her in the chest. I watched Terrence. His face had gone pale, not the color of skin, but the color of fear. The fear of a man realizing the one thing he bragged about all his life had no foundation. "No, no way. Ma, this." Terrence looked at me, pure panic in his eyes. "Ma, did you know I knew a few days ago?" I said. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because at that time, you were too busy trying to throw me out of my own house." Silence dropped over the room. Heavy, thick, unmovable. Renee broke it, her voice steady like a heart monitor. "If you continue insisting on disputing the property, I will have to submit the full adoption record and the farewell letter from your biological grandfather to court. At that point, local media will be informed of the Carter family's actual history." Keisha shrank back. Terrence looked hollow, like his soul slipped right out of him. Nobody in this city's black business community wants their family tied to forged documents or hidden identities. Reputation is paper thin. Once it tears, Nothing patches it up again. Terence understood. I saw the exact moment the realization hit him, like a shadow passing across his face. So, what do you want? Ma, Terence whispered, barely audible. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to feel that silence, the silence I'd been denied for so many years. Then I spoke, one word at a time. I want you to understand this house ain't some toy you get to fix when you want and take when you want. This is the blood and bone of this family, and I will not let anybody steal it from me. Terence lowered his head, his shoulders collapsing like a broken branch. Renee packed up her documents, stepped back, and said, "What I delivered today was a warning. If you keep pushing, the next step will be criminal charges. None of us want to go there, at least not yet." Keisha squeezed Terrence's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. Terrence said nothing. No arguing. No excuses. Just stood there, like a tree ripped from the soil, waiting to fall. When Renee got ready to leave, she leaned toward me and murmured, "You did very well, Miss Marlene. This is only the beginning. From now on, you're not the one being acted upon." I smiled, not a victorious smile, but the smile of a woman who just reclaimed the part of herself she'd lost long ago. When the door closed behind Renee, I turned back into the house. Terence was still standing there, face drained. I walked past him, quiet as a breeze, and I heard him whisper, "Ma, Mama." For the first time in months, he sounded like a child again. But I didn't turn around. Not because I stopped loving my son, but because sometimes a mother has to let her child face what he created with his own hands. I kept walking, and deep inside, I knew this was just the warm-up. The real storm was still on its way. I put a whole lot of time and heart into bringing this story to life. If you don't like it, go on and hit that like button. And if you do like it, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Now then, let's get back to the story. After the morning Renee came to the house and delivered that legal notice, my home sank into a silence heavier than the first storm of the season. Keisha stayed quiet in a way that felt dangerous. The kind of quiet people keep when they know one wrong word can make everything collapse under their feet. I left them alone, not because I wanted to, but because I knew this stillness was just the pullback before somebody tries to strike back. And I was right. On the third day, late afternoon, Terence walked into the kitchen while I was washing some kale. He stood there for a long while, saying nothing. I didn't turn around. I'd learned my silence made him more nervous than 100 questions. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Ma, we want to have a family meeting. Not to pressure you or anything, just so the misunderstandings can get cleared up." I set the greens down, wiped my hands on a towel, and turned to face him. "A meeting with who?" "With Aunt Linda, Uncle Charles, some of the cousins. I want them to hear things from both sides." I stared straight into his eyes. A part of me wanted to laugh. Both sides? The other side being the mother he locked in a basement? But I didn't say it. I just asked, "Where's this meeting at our new apartment?" "Tomorrow night." I nodded. "All right, I'll be there." Terence exhaled. Soft. Relieved. The way a man breathes when he thinks maybe, just maybe, he found a way back in his favor. But that hope was nothing but a mirage. Their apartment sat in a modern complex 20 minutes from my house. I arrived just after sunset, the sky a soft bruised purple. When the elevator doors opened, I saw a line of people in the living room. Aunt Linda, Uncle Charles, a few distant relatives, and some of Terrence's business friends. Terrence stepped forward to greet me with a half smile. The kind people wear when they're trying to hide the panic carved into their sleepless nights. "Ma, you made it! Come on, have a seat." I stepped inside. Every eye went to me, not with sympathy, but with expectation. Waiting for a story, Keisha brought out drinks, her voice soft enough to make my spine tighten. "Ma, you want anything?" "No." "Thank you." Terrence stood in the middle of the room, adjusting his collar like he was about to give a presentation. "First of all, thank you all for coming. Our families had some tension lately. Mom misunderstood us, and maybe we misunderstood her. I just wanted to clear things up before this goes too far. I sat still. My hands resting on my lap didn't tremble one bit. Terrence kept going. Ma, she's been affected by age. Sometimes she thinks we're trying to take the house. But we just want her to be safe, to have proper care, and the transfer papers. That was just a misunderstanding. I didn't. You didn't what? I asked, voice soft as spring wind. Didn't forge my signature. The room went dead silent. Eyes bounced from me. Terrence tried to steady his voice. Ma, you shouldn't say things like that in front of everybody. I'm only saying what's true. I locked my gaze on his true, like the forged signature on the paperwork you filed. Keisha tugged his arm, whispering, let me handle it. But I lifted a hand, calm and effortless. No need to whisper, Keisha. Everybody here groaned. They deserve the truth. I opened my bag and took out the signature verification report Renee gave me. I set it on the table. The court confirmed that signature ain't mine. Aunt Linda leaned in, eyes widening. Uncle Charles cleared his throat. So, Terrence, you got something to say about this? Terrence swallowed hard. His neck tightened like he was pushing down a stone. That was just a form I tested, not the real one. I looked at him, slow and steady. A test? What else you testing? Terrence, locking me in the basement. Was that a test too? The whispers started. Sharp, startled breaths, chairs shifting. Terrence spun toward me. Ma, don't. Don't tell the truth. I asked you that, afraid of the truth. No one spoke. I didn't intend to give him space to recover. I pulled out the birth certificate and adoption papers, set them down like I was placing the final card in a winning hand. Ever since you told me I didn't belong in my own house, I went through every document tied to that property, and I found something you never imagined I'd find. I looked straight at him, not angry, not hateful, just with the eyes of someone who finally sees the picture clearly. Your daddy wasn't a Carter by blood. He was adopted. I got the full records right here. A wave of gasps rolled through the room. Keisha slapped both hands over her mouth. Terrence stepped back like someone had struck him. No, no way. Look for yourself, I said, sliding the papers toward him. Your father's real name wasn't Carter, which means the Carter bloodline you cling to so tightly ain't what you think it is. The room froze. One of Terrence's business friends, the man in the gray suit, whispered loud enough for me to hear, God. So the whole reputation he'd been flaunting was built on a misunderstanding. I didn't need to say another word. The room was doing the rest. Terrence looked around, desperation rising in his face. Ma, you're destroying me. No, I said slowly. I'm not destroying you. You started that the day you locked me in that basement. Keisha broke into tears. Not for me, but for the future she thought she had. Turning to ash in her hands, Terrence collapsed onto a chair, hands clutching his head. No one went to comfort him. No one said, maybe this is all a big mistake. No one stepped onto his side. No one stepped onto his side. And in that moment, I knew everyone in that room finally saw what I had seen long ago. A man not shaped by circumstance, but by greed, by entitlement, by ingratitude. Terrence's mask didn't fall with a bang. It fell with silence, the kind that hurts deeper than any sound. I stood up. I'm heading home, I said. Anyone got questions, Renee will answer them. And Terrence, you take time to think about everything you did. I don't need your apology. I just need you to look straight at your own actions. I walked toward the door without looking back. And when it closed behind me, I knew Terrence's life had split into a new river. A river he carved himself, and one no one else could rescue him from. After that night at Terrence's apartment, I felt like I'd just walked out of a storm I didn't even realize could be that fierce. But what surprised me most wasn't what I said or what Renee exposed. What stunned me for days afterward was the silence. A strange kind of silence. not the silence of peace, but the silence of something dying, with nobody left willing to save it. In the days that followed, Terrence didn't call, didn't text, didn't leave a note. Not a single "I'm sorry," not even the soft knock on a door that desperate people give when they want to ask for forgiveness but don't know how. My house, the house I once felt was being invaded, settled back into its true tone: quiet, old, worn, but honest. And somehow, that quiet felt easier to breathe in. Some mornings, I sat by the window with my coffee, watching sunlight slide across the porch steps, and I would think, maybe the deepest pain isn't losing a child. Maybe it's realizing your child never truly saw you. But I didn't blame him. Not anymore. News about Terrence came from other people, not from him. Aunt Linda called first. "Your boy, did he quit his job, Marlene? Folks say he lost a big contract because of some paperwork mess." I listened but didn't answer. Not because I was glad or sad, just because I could feel everything falling back into the place it was meant to be. Renee once told me, "A man with ambition but no foundation will crumble fast." More calls followed. Uncle Charles said Terrence was trying to sell the apartment, but nobody wanted it. His name was sour in the market. Then an old friend of Samuel's stopped me at the grocery store, whispered, "The boy looks drained, ma'am, like somebody sucked the soul right out of him." I nodded, said nothing. Some truths hurt less when you don't look at them too close. About a month later, I heard Terrence and Keisha had left Michigan altogether, moved to some small town in Indiana. Nobody knew exactly what they were doing. One of Keisha's friends said she was working front desk at a low-budget hair salon. Terrence, well, rumors said warehouse work. Others said maybe a job at a strip mall. I didn't investigate, not because of hatred, but because my heart had already closed the door to that chapter. Motherhood, once broken far enough, doesn't snap like a guitar string. It breaks like fishing line. No sound, no warning, just a quiet parting. Around that same time, Samuel's health dimmed like a lantern running out of oil. He'd already been sick for a while, but after what Terrence did, locking me in that basement, I saw something in Samuel's eyes sink faster. One evening, he held my hand. That old, trembling hand, still warm like it was the first night he touched me on that dance floor all those years ago. Voice shaking, but each word steady. "I'm sorry that you had to carry so much." I placed his hand over my heart, where my slow, stubborn heartbeat lived. "It ain't your fault." I said, "You were never a burden. This house, this life, you always been the best part of it." He smiled, a thin, smoky smile. "I only regret I can't stay with you to the end." "Samuel," I told him, "you've been with me my whole life." And that night, he left, peacefully, quietly, like a final breath, drifting into a wide, gentle sky without pain. I buried him beside my mother-in-law, under the oak tree behind the church he loved. When the last handful of earth fell, I knew a full chapter of my life had closed for good. I sent Terrence a message, just 2 lines. "Your father has passed. I'm letting you know." No reply. 3 days later, one text came. "Sorry," one word, one period, nothing else. I stared at it for a long while. Then I deleted it, not out of anger, but because I knew the distance between us had grown into a gap that could never be bridged. A gap not made in one day, but built brick by brick over many years. In the weeks after Samuel passed, I rearranged my quiet life, piece by piece. I emptied his closet, folded every sweater, took down his little keepsakes from the living room and packed them into a box, placed it in the spare room I now called the memory room. Terrence didn't come home, didn't call, didn't send another message. I knew he was alive, but I no longer knew that he was living. And those are 2 very different things. People like to say a mother never leaves her child, but I think there's another truth. Some children leave their mother long before she ever notices. I stopped waiting for him. Waiting too long without an answer isn't love, quote. It's a wound. And I had bled for him long enough. Then one day, while I was hanging clothes on the porch, the wind off the lake whipped hard, making the shirts flap like white flags. I watched the clouds drift south, and I felt something ease inside me. People think the ending of betrayal is revenge or rage, but the real ending is when you simply stop feeling anything at all. I lost a son, but I found myself again. And sometimes that's the price life demands. That night, I lit a candle beside Samuel's picture. The little flame flickered, casting a soft glow across the home. I was slowly reclaiming in my own quiet way. Samuel, I whispered, I'm gonna keep living, not for nobody else, for me. Then I let the candle burn out on its own, slowly, gently, like the closing of a chapter, soft, quiet, but forever. There are mornings when I open my eyes and feel like I've woken up in another lifetime, not because everything has changed, but because in this house, the same house, once filled with shadows, fear, and betrayal, something I thought I lost forever has found its way back, peace. Not the loud kind of peace you read about in books or see in movies, but the kind of peace that breathes quiet, settles soft, like a thin shawl laid gently across your shoulders. After Samuel died, and Terrence slipped out of my life like a candle blown out by a hard wind, every corner brought something back: laughter, arguments, footsteps, the familiar call of Ma, as if the house was reminding me, not holding on. One afternoon, sunlight fell in slanted gold through the window, and I decided to go down to the basement. As I stepped down each stair, I felt like I was descending into my own past, a past I didn't always dare to look back at. The smell of old wood, dust that had slept for years, and the creak of those worn steps pressed on my chest heavy, but not hurting. I turned on the light, and the dim yellow glow hit the wall, the same wall that once hid the box that pulled me out of despair. I stood there a long time, not afraid, not cold, just standing in the place I'd once been trapped and feeling completely strange how the place that was once my prison now felt like the place where a new woman had been born. So I decided to do something I never imagined before: turn that basement into a room of my own. I cleaned everything out, dusted every shelf, gathered the things I no longer needed. I brought down a small table, a few picture frames, and a little bookshelf, not to decorate, but to carve out a space where I could hear myself, where no one else could intrude, take, or claim. I placed the old wooden box on a shelf by itself. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. The truth inside that box had already done its job. It taught me that not everything from the past is meant to be carried. Some truths are only meant to be known, not lived in again. When the room was finally done, I turned on the light. The glow hit the walls warm, brighter than before, almost like the basement was breathing with me. And in that quiet moment, I understood. Rebirth doesn't need fireworks or sunshine. Sometimes, all it needs is one warm bulb in a room that once scared you. I lived alone for 6 months after that. No interruptions, no demands, no one else tugging at my breath. I planted vegetables in the backyard. I cooked the dishes Samuel loved. I walked around Lake Allen every morning, watching the mist glide over the water like a silver veil. One morning, when the wind flipped the edge of my scarf, I stopped and realized something every woman who lives long enough eventually understands. Freedom isn't when you walk away from people. Freedom is when you walk away from the expectations that kept you small. I no longer waited for Terrence, no longer hoped he'd change. I let his existence drift away from me like a little boat slipping off the shore into its own gray fog. I didn't hold on, didn't reach, didn't save space in my heart for things that shrank me. One evening, standing in my redone basement, I touched the edge of the wooden shelf and found myself whispering, Samuel, you see this? I'm standing on my own now. There was no answer, only the soft hum of that yellow light. But I felt him there, not in body, but in the peace he left behind. It was the first time I ever thanked the pain I'd lived through, because without it, I might still be a shadow inside this house, letting other people decide my worth. Not anymore. One autumn morning, with the wind drifting through the trees out back, I opened the basement door and walked down. I sat on the wooden chair I had just repainted and watched the thin light slip in through the tiny window. It wasn't bright, but it was enough to warm my legs. enough to touch me. And I thought, maybe freedom for an old woman isn't about being understood by others. Maybe it's about finally understanding yourself. I closed my eyes and let that soft sunlight rest on my face like a quiet embrace from the universe. I, Marlene Carter, had finally stepped out of someone else's life and into my own. No more fear, no more burdens, no more carrying things that were never mine to carry. I was free, absolutely, completely. And no one had the right to take that from me again. The weight slipped off me like morning fog. My heart opened gentle as fall skies. And if anyone asked me when freedom came, I'd say, when you can stand inside the very place that once terrified you and not even tremble. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, or ever had to stand back up in a home full of memories and wounds, then you understand my pain better than any explanation could offer. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your story. And if this story touched you, leave a like. Walking this last stretch with me.